A mummy. A long time ago, in ancient Egypt, there lived a pharaoh named Mech. And when Mech died, the royal priest and priestess wrapped his body to prepare it for the afterlife. But 1,000 years later, some archaeologists from another country discovered Mech's pyramid and took his sarcophagus with them. When Mech woke up, he was disappointed to find out that he was in a museum and not in the afterlife like he expected. On top of that, they didn't put his sarcophagus in a nice spot. So Mech was angry, and he used his mummy powers to make a big mess things in the museum. But even after Mech destroyed the museum, he wasn't satisfied. So I went outside, and that's where he really did some damage. That night, Mech was all over the news for wrecking the city. Mech was just getting started though. He went from country to country, destroying everything in his path, and whenever he went, he made headlines. But after a while, Mech ran out of things to destroy, and people started losing interest anyways. Eventually, Mech settled down a little and tried to get used to living in a modern world. And even though he would rather be in the afterlife, he had pretty admit television was a pretty good invention. One night, Mech was watching the news, and there was a story about how some archaeologists made a new discovery in Egypt, and they found a tomb of Kaaba, a pharaoh who lived 4,000 years ago. Well, first, Mech started getting angry because this brought back memories of what happened to him. After a few minutes of deep breath, he was able to calm down. People were getting excited about this new discovery because Kaaba's tomb was really glitzy and full of treasures. But everyone was nervous when they opened Kaaba's sarcophagus because no one wanted to repeat of the Mech situation. Things were different this time around. First of all, Kaaba was much better preserved than Mech. And Mech was kind of annoyed when people on the news kept pointing that out. When Kaaba stepped onto this tomb, he didn't just start randomly destroying things. In fact, he seemed curious about the modern world and everything in it. Kaaba started appearing on morning talk shows, and before long, he was everyone's favorite mummy. And Mech admitted he was jealous. In fact, Kaaba was so popular that people started making all sorts of mummy merchandise and used his image without asking permission. So Kaaba hired a slick lawyer, and before long, all that stuff was shut down. But then Kaaba's lawyer took it a step further. His lawyer trademarked the mummy, which made it so that Kaaba was the only one who could use that name. And then she made a big announcement about it in front of the TV cameras. Well, this really ticked off Mech, who didn't think it was right that Kaaba could do that. Plus, Mech was annoyed that he didn't think of it first. After a while, Kaaba had his own fashion line and kids' cereal and an even major motion picture and in the works. And everywhere Mech went was Kaaba's face. Mech thought it was time for him to cash in on the mummy craze too, so he started calling himself the original mummy, and he put out a few ads out there. But a few weeks later, Mech got a letter from Kaaba's Yal threatening to sue him for everything he owned unless he took down the ads. But this just made him Mech mad, because not as mad as he used to go around destroying cities with his mummy powers, but he was still pretty mad. So Mech hired a lawyer of his own and sued Kaaba to try and stop him from calling himself the mummy, since Mech was famous first. And it was a huge trial and everyone watched it on TV. Well, Mech didn't have a lot of money, so his lawyer wasn't as slick as Kaaba's, and when the trial ended, the judge ruled that Kaaba was the winner. Mech had to agree that he would never use the name the original mummy or the classic mummy or anything like that. In fact, all he was allowed to do was call himself a mummy in lowercase letters. For a while, Mech try to make some money by calling him a mummy, but you can't really make money with a name like that. Meg started working at an amusement park for Fright Night in October, but it wasn't much fun because it was a lot harder to scare people these days. Meg still wasn't giving up though. He started calling himself the Dead Pharaoh to get around the court agreement that it turns out there was already a professional wrestler with that name, and Meg just ended up back in court. Things were great for Kava for a few years, but after a while, the whole Mummy act got stale and people stopped going to his movies. Eventually, he got into a comedy, but he made a few stinkers. That was the end of his film career. Then someone claimed that he found a big toe in the box of Mummy's flakes, and Faba got sued for $1 million. And even though it turned out the person who sued him made the whole thing up, nobody would buy any project from the word mummy on them after all. Soon, Kaba started to dry up, and he couldn't afford any fancy lifestyle he used to. After a while, he had to sell his private jet and the 3 mansions at a discount. Things got even worse when his wife left him and took half his money. Kaba finally hit rock bottom when he had to sell his own sarcophagus. But things started to turn around for Kaba as he ran into his old arch enemy, Mek, who's working as a food bagger at the grocery store. The two mummies got talking, and it turned out they had a lot more common than they thought. Kaba and Mek became friends after a while, and Kaba moved into Mek's apartment. And even though they didn't get along as roommates, the only thing they agreed was that the television was really a great invention. The end.